the Quiet Warrior Show, where we help top leaders find their pathway to incredible success and a lifetime of happiness. Here is your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
Well, welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show. My name is Tom Dutta. I am the Quiet Warrior, and I'm excited today to bring on my show a very special guest. But before we get to our guest, I'd like to tell you that this show will be premiered as a YouTube video. It will also be broadcast against all major podcast channels and international podcasts. So please find the show on my YouTube channel, Tom Dutta, or on your favorite podcast channel, and give it a high rating when you find it so that we can honor our guest's amazing story. So welcome to the show, Emily Chang.
Thanks so much for having me, Tom.
Yeah, it's amazing. You know, I have to say, I've done shows internationally. This is my first one to China, so very, very excited to have you on. And I know we have a bit of a time difference. We were just talking offline that you've, in your career and in your travels, you've been to Vancouver, where I am in British Columbia, through Seattle. You're in Shanghai now, I think, and a bit of a holiday, right?
We're on May holiday right now, which gives me a little bit of time to do a little extra book stuff.
Book stuff is great. And well, that's a big reason why we have you on the show. So Emily, if you can just take a moment while I tell everybody a bit about you. Everyone, I want to read you something out of the book, and I have it in my hands here. We're going to talk about it. Yeah, there it is, The Spare Room. Look at that. It actually disappeared on us. And if you're watching the video premiere of this, you'll see a bunch of these books right beside Emily in her home there. Pretty amazing. Emily is currently the CEO of McCann Worldgroup in China. She previously served as the Chief Marketing Officer for Starbucks China and the Chief Commercial Officer for Intercontinental Hotels Group in Greater China. Early in her career, she led retail marketing for Apple in Asia Pacific and began her career with 11 years at Procter & Gamble. She's action-oriented, visionary, known for cross-cultural team engagement, and I could go on. And I'm just honored to talk about you that way, Emily, because one of the things that we want to see more of is more women in leadership, come into the airwaves and dominate. Quite frankly, I've said this on my shows, I believe women are stronger leaders. They're more transformational. And even though it's still not the even playing field we want to see out there, I'm so inspired by you and what I see you've done. So let's talk about where this all began. Tell us where you were born and how you sort of got to where you are in your career. And then I'll take a right turn and get into this amazing book.
Well, thank you so much for your kind words. I was born in the States in Atlanta, Georgia, where my father was getting his PhD. And shortly after that, he graduated and we started moving up and down the East Coast. We ended up in upstate New York, and that's where I grew up from third grade on in a little town called Pittsford, New York, just outside of Rochester. As the child of immigrant parents, I grew up very independent. I was called a latchkey kid. I don't know if you have those in Canada. You wear the key around your neck and you go home on your own. Lots of things that I don't even think are legal these days, but we grew up independently. I took care of my little brother. And I think that's a big part of developing grit and a sense of figuring it out. Because back then there was no internet. There were no mobile phones. You couldn't call your parents at work. So if you lost your key, you had to figure it out. If you got in and didn't know how to turn on the stove and you were hungry, you couldn't make yourself a snack. So that was how I grew up. And then I ended up deciding I wanted to be a pediatric oncologist. So I went full blown into science, knowing that getting into med school is really tough. So I started very early on collecting as many experiences as I could, like from being a candy striper in hospitals as early as I could to working in these chemistry labs. And then I realized eventually I didn't probably have the emotional distance to be a doctor to very hurting young children. And so I took a little left and went in and got my MBA, and that's how I ended up in business.
Wow, it's amazing. And they say that many people, they stumble into a career, sometimes they're placed in a place where they're not even sure they belong. And it's interesting to hear about your early beginnings. I didn't know that part of your story. And I'm glad you followed your heart. I want to talk about a little bit, because I go back to things like my childhood, and there's some formative belief systems in the early years. Were your parents working people? You said that you were a latchkey kid. Were they professionals, or what was that all about?
My father was a professional. He worked at ExxonMobil for his entire career, basically. And my mother was always looking for work. So she ended up, I think, at the front desk of a number of sort of medical offices.
I see.
So, yeah, they were both gone sort of during the day and would show up around dinner time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, my story, we're not going to focus on me today, but I come from that same era, before computers and the latchkey. Had a mother and father who both worked, and things changed for me in my early teens because they fell apart and left the divorce. But what I'm interested in is, here you are and you went into business and you climbed the corporate ladder fairly quickly right to the top. I mean, that's remarkable. Talk a little bit about that, particularly sometimes in what's seen as a man's world, how you were able to succeed where you have. It's amazing.
Well, I guess my first thing I should admit a little bit vulnerably is it wasn't intentional.
Okay.
Because I was enrolled in an MD MBA program back in the late 90s. And so the only reason I went to business school is because I realized I didn't have that emotional distance to be a doctor, had no idea what to do because that's all I ever wanted to be as a kid.
Yeah.
But because I was in an MD MBA, I thought, well, maybe somebody will just give me an MBA and I can figure out what all those people do when they walk in and out of buildings holding briefcases and wearing suits. That was really how basic it was. And then I didn't even know what to study. So I picked up corporate finance because math is similar to science. And I think I've explored. I don't believe I've ever had a clear objective other than let me learn something and hopefully I can contribute something. And I think with that spirit, life has taken me where it's taken me. So when I was recruited straight out of my MBA by Procter & Gamble, it was for finance. But I had this amazing woman who leaned into me, Paris Watts Stanfield, we're still in touch, who said, I will definitely offer you an internship in finance in my department. But I actually think you might be a really good brand manager. And I naively said, what's a brand manager? I didn't even know what the function was. I didn't know how esteemed Procter & Gamble was for brand management. I really was very naive in a lot of ways. But I guess I would say rather than climbing the corporate ladder, I was curious, I was interested to learn, and I was unafraid to ask a lot of questions. I'm not fearful of looking stupid. And I think, that sounds like a very strange key to success, but I think that really is it because I said, she literally gave me a little booklet saying something like all about brand management. And I read it and I thought that looks really fun. And then I went back and re-interviewed for brand management. And that's how I started my internship at P&G. And I remember even when you join the company, they have a digital system, which is your work and development plan. And you go in and you input who you are, what your career goals are, et cetera. And I remember sitting there thinking, I don't know what a general manager does, but I know that brand management is a track to learn how to become a GM. So I guess all I'm going to put in is teach me everything. I said, I would love end-to-end experience. I want to learn all the different parts of being a GM, from upstream to downstream, international, retail. Show me all of that. And I would love to see if I can contribute. So that doesn't sound very vertical in a corporate ladder way. Yeah. And it wasn't. It was much more broad. I just thought, let me learn, and then I'll figure out the things that I like to do and the things that I don't like to do.
Well, I think that's amazing. They say that in the narrative of my show, The Hero's Journey, it's about common threads. And every time you're talking, it inspires me. When you talk about your career, I just had a flashback. I went on a journey, Emily, to my own career coming out of high school, being encouraged after to university to go into business. And yet when I was in my early years, I did book reports on being a dentist and a doctor and a lawyer, a little bit of influence, I think, from my parents. But I ended up in a business career and I didn't know what leadership was. I didn't know what a general manager was. And I moved into some of those roles, but it's almost like you were part of my brain at that time because I just did what my father taught me. He was a commanding officer in the military. It was work harder than anybody in the room and learn and don't expect anybody to give you, what you deserve. You work hard. And I was a sponge. Even to this day, I'm a lifelong learner. And I think that's amazing. So I think everybody, that's a teaching moment on the show for all of those watching this show. You're talking to and seeing Emily, CEO of a corporation, but she didn't start there and she had a different focus. So it's okay to change. Now, I want to go into this amazing book. So this, I said to you offline, and I'm just going to, toot your horn a little bit, that I read this whole book today. and I hunkered down at the bar in my home office here, and I could not stop reading it. And everybody, I'm going to just tell you, it's called The Spare Room. It's Define Your Social Legacy to Live a More Intentional Life and Lead with Authentic Purpose. And it was just published in April. So congratulations, Emily. I want to read something off the cover. Over the last 21 years, Emily's job has brought her and her family to 8 different homes across the United States and China. And everywhere she lived, Emily has found herself at the intersection of her own offer and offense. Life has served up young people who have been abused, neglected, or marginalized. To find sanctuary in her spare room, among deeply personal accounts of her social legacy, Emily shares heart-wrenching stories of an emotionally abused child bride, a dying 18-month-old boy born with hydrocephalus, and the abused daughter of a local prostitute. Now, that just stops me and I tracks everybody. First of all, to write a book like this. Secondly, to have the vision to have a room in your home where children, you would bring them in, just blew my mind. So I want to start off by taking into that journey. I wrote this down here, page, the numeral of the page was 16. And there's something, I wrote this down, driven by something personally relevant, deeply personal, and you link that to discovering what your offer is. And we're going to get into that in more detail, I'm sure. But given your lifeline and what you said about growing up being a latchkey kid and your parents, what was deeply personal about making this your legacy? What was it that you experienced, that aha moment where you knew this is what you were going to do?
I don't think there's a moment. I think it was a buildup because we didn't always have that vision. I can't take that credit for the lovely thing you just said. We didn't have a vision that said, we're going to open our spare room. This is going to be our thing. It's like we had one kid. I had one kid when I was single and then another one. And my husband was my boyfriend at the time. And we really partnered up. And I really saw him as my partner early on because he was so in it with me. And then as we got married, we met another person who needed a place. And then we met another one. And we're like, it probably took 6 or 7 where maybe we're not quick learners before we're like, gosh, this seems unusually frequent that these people keep showing up in our lives. And it was, and so I think it was a culmination of a couple of people that we met. And then it came to a place where people kept asking, how does this keep happening? And we said, we think there's this sort of magical flow in the universe where because we're open to it, these young people just keep finding us. I think that's a true statement. I think when we're open to being of service, those people who need that kind of service are gravitated to us. Or they gravitate to us. And then people started to say things like, oh, I could never do what you do. And I think that's really untrue. And I wanted to unpack, why is that untrue? And I thought, okay, maybe you don't feel comfortable bringing people into your spare room, but you absolutely have something unique to offer. And I don't think any of us was created to live a humdrum life. I think we were all created to be contributory and to live thriving lives and deliver something extraordinary with this one life we have. So then I was thinking, how do we help people to find what that thing is? And, I've listened to some of your previous podcasts as well. And you've even used the words I've used, which is, how do you leave a legacy behind?
Yeah.
And that's really what I was thinking. Legacy can sometimes be a weighty word, but it's really, for me, simply, how do I leave something better than how I found it? And the place, I think we can all define. And that's what we try to do, is get very practical in the book. Like you read the subheader of the title. It's not a sexy one. It's very practical, but that's really what it's about, is how do you define your space? For some people, it really is just their home. It's their family. Yeah. For some people, it's their neighborhood. There's some stories that didn't make the book that were about a man and how he just transformed his neighborhood. There are other people who would say it's their workplace. There are others who would say it's their state, it's their region, it's their country. Some people would say it's the earth. And all of us have this opportunity to say, if we can define what that thing is, and then we can really think about what we have to contribute toward that, the intersection is incredibly freeing because it helps us define what our intention is. And until you have it sort of clearly articulated, you can't fully live into it. So it was all these thoughts, and it was all the kids that started to come into our home that we started realizing this is a thing for us, but it's not just for us, and we're nobody special. Everybody has the chance to do something similar. And if we have the opportunity to help people to find theirs, I hope that this isn't a book. It becomes more of a movement where people start saying, what's your spare room?
Yeah, well, I think it is going to become a movement because the book got me so much in my heart, or in my soul, actually. I just couldn't get over it. There's a couple of things. There was a Canadian study done long ago, and they asked 90-year-olds what were your top three regrets, Emily, at the age of 90, obviously. When all the data came in, the top three were I didn't take enough risk, I didn't create a big enough legacy or make a contribution. And the third one escapes me, but right on that list there is legacy and contribution. So my brain went on a journey here. And as a CEO myself, I'm somebody who now coaches executives. I have a small practice. A lot of times I've encountered people who are having challenges with their health or mental health or physical health. They're burning out because it's a very high pressure career, and they haven't created anything beyond themselves. And I usually ask them, what if the job went away today, what's left? And I'm a man of faith, so I believe that my faith is number one. I have my relationship with God, and how am I going to leave a contribution? And yet that question, for most of the people I talk to, they haven't figured it out. They're on a treadmill, and sadly, some of them have heart attacks or strokes, or they just lose their jobs and they're lost. That's why this book really resonated, and it's such a gift, and I'm going to highly recommend it in my practice, because it actually lays out a blueprint, and we're going to get into that in a minute, of, okay, it's nice that you came up with an idea of a spare room and children, you're finding them, they're coming to you through the universe, but how does one create that in their lives? What is it? And that today, when I was looking at this, out of everything I've done, Emily, with my own platform and the work I do, it made me rethink, because I couldn't quite answer that question about what is my offer. I have pieces of what I think it is, but it really stretched me, and I think it was brilliant. I want to just mention to everybody, we talked about it briefly. There's some stories in this book. I love the stories because they get you into the journey. I read about, I won't give the stories away, Emily, but Devon and Michael. Devon was a woman, or a young lady. Michael was a boyfriend. This was a child bride story, age 16 and 18, and I think they married. And what was remarkable in the story, everybody, I'm just going to put it out there for Emily to get into with me, is you found her, and you can tell us a bit about how that happened. She stayed in your spare room for 4 months, I think, and then she left, but came back again for, I think, 2 or 3 months. And man, it was a case of domestic violence. And I just was trying to imagine how many of those cases are out there. Where would she have gone? So just tell us very quickly about Devon. How did you meet her? And she ended up in your spare room and then came back again. What was the outcome?
Yeah, Devon's super close to my heart. This was before my daughter was born. And I met her at a salon. I was living in Cincinnati, Ohio, when I was working at Procter & Gamble. And she was the young girl working at the front desk. And there was like some sort of drama happening. And we were all sort of perched like, different types of black crows with our black capes and different states of sort of hair undress. And we watched this drama unfold where this young girl was saying, I have nowhere to live. I don't know what I'm going to do. And nobody really knew much about it. Where, all the ladies, as you do in a salon, started shouting advice like, you need to do this, you need to do that. And when I was checking out, she was there and still sort of wiping tears away. And I said, what's going on? She had moved from her family's hometown, a couple hours drive away in Kentucky, to come be with her boyfriend. She was like 16 or 17. And her boyfriend, I think, was 19. And they had underestimated, because they were children, how expensive it is to live in, I think she was in a motel. And all of their money was almost gone after like 2 or 3 weeks, instead of what they thought was going to hold them over for months. They didn't want to live together. Her parents felt like that would be living in sin. They came from a very traditional religious household.
Yeah.
And so I just said, well, I had moved into a house with lots of extra space. It was just me and my husband. We were newly married. I said, well, why don't you just move in with us for a little while? So I went with her to her motel and she picked up her things. And then I called my husband on the way. I think I had a BlackBerry back then. And I was like, I'm bringing somebody home. And then she came and moved in with us and she was very sweet. It was actually just a lovely relationship. We'd been wanting to decorate our spare room. We were newlyweds, so it was like a mishmash of college furniture left over. So we decorated for her. She moved in. It was really lovely. She was the sweetest spirit. And then she went and got married to her boyfriend very quickly. Yeah. And there's some things that really surprise you. Like it's not very hard to do at all. In fact, back then I did a bunch of research. Child marriage is allowed in all 50 states back then with a simple judge's signature or parent's signature. And I did a lot of research about this because I didn't just want to tell stories. I also wanted to be, data-wise accurate about the social situation. And I met Frady Rice, who created a nonprofit called Unchained at Last. In fact, I had an email from her this morning. She's doing an event with Chelsea Clinton. She's been dedicating her life, this is her social legacy, to fighting child marriage and one state at a time, getting these laws passed, because you don't realize that's a really big crack in the social justice system where we allow young girls as young as 12 to get married to any age man with a signature. Yeah. But these girls cannot get a credit card. If they are in an abusive situation, they can't go to a women's shelter because they're not women. If they run away, they can be dragged back by the husband because they're deemed a runaway if the husband is of age. Yeah. So it's a tough situation for them to be in. Not everyone is, but to your question earlier, hundreds of thousands of child marriages have happened over the last 10 years. In the US.
I mean, it's amazing. I mean, here I am in Canada, but I have a lot of experience at working and traveling in the US, a lot of American friends. And I understood that when I read the book and I went, wow, it made me really think. It's such a worldview that there needs to be, people out there who can make a difference to some of these young people. What blew my mind was how I think this person that she married had, some anger issues and she came back. And so this is one thing that blew me away about you and your husband, what you've done. Now, everybody, this is a teaching moment. If you were going down the street and you saw somebody on the street who looked like they were in need, would you say, hey, come on to my house and you have a spare room and have them stay with you? I'll challenge most people wouldn't do that. And that's why you're a hero in my heart, because that's just incredible. We live in a world of such skepticism and fear and, what if this person is this and what if there's risk? But everybody, the power of your book is that when you have an intentional passion for something that's driven by something deeply personal, nothing knocks you off your path. And when I first started reading this and saying, okay, there's one story and and there's like 16 of these cases. It's just unbelievable. You and your husband are a gift from God. Minky like Pinky is what you taught me. I want to ask you to clarify something you said earlier when we were talking about your career possibly being in the medical field. You said, I'm not distanced enough from, what did you mean by that? From emotion?
This isn't in the book at all, but I had come across a little girl who was in the pediatric intensive care unit, PQ. Yeah. I was volunteering, trying to build up my resume for medical school, and she was really looking very normal for being in PQ. In intensive care, you have babies who are on ventilators that, little limbs are in traction. Yep. She seemed okay. And that's probably why they assigned her to me, because I was still really young. And as I got to know her, I wasn't allowed to change her diaper. I wasn't allowed to do anything other than kind of hold her in the ward. And finally, one day, this nurse saw that I was getting really attached to her because she was diagnosed as failure to thrive. And I didn't know that was a thing. I didn't know that you could be treated so badly that even as a baby, you lost the will to live. You were physically trying to die. And with love and somebody holding you, like she started to come back a little bit. And I became very attached to her. Her name was Dulceda. One day, the nurse looked at me. She said, I'm not supposed to let you do this, but just change her diaper. I said, all right, I don't know why I can't. I'm capable of changing a diaper. I lifted up her little legs to change her diaper, and it was from heel to what I could see of her back, covered in scars. And I found out that her parents had been drug addicts. She had been taken out of the home while they were high and trying to cook her in a frying pan. Oh my goodness. So this baby it broke my heart. She had little tiny, marks in her arm where they'd been injecting her with drugs. Yeah. And I said, that's it. She was there as a pro bono case, and she obviously couldn't go back to her family. She can't go to an orphanage or some other long-term care situations because failure to thrive requires a lot of resource.
Yeah.
So I decided to defer med school and adopt her. So that was sort of, she possibly would have been the first baby in our spare room, but after a little while, as I remember, I even bought a crib from Goodwill, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do this thing. I can make this happen. And I came in one day and she was gone because they found a foster home for her, which was certainly a better situation for her. But I walked out devastated. And I remember thinking, how could I possibly be a doctor? I just tried to adopt the first kid that I'm volunteering with. And that's what it was.
So first of all, Emily, catch your breath. I want to honor you for sharing that story. It's the ultimate invulnerability. This is why I was saying to you, or I might have said it offline before we came on, that I believe I've said this on my shows, that especially being a man who's been in business all my life, that women are better leaders in many respects than men. They're transformational leaders. And that there, what you just told, is the ultimate connection in my mind to the hero's journey. Now I understand why you bring all these children into your home. And I'm glad that you can't distance yourself emotionally, because that is a gift. I believe it's a God-given gift that you can get that close, and you can have tears and cry and want to hold them and do something for them. That's just amazing to me. I want to talk about the way the book's written. You can talk about that, obviously, but what I really loved, it's one of the best, probably the best book. Well, it is the best book I've ever read in terms of helping me. It's like a blueprint, helping me discover what my legacy. So I want to throw out a couple terms. And I've read a lot of books, everybody. I'm an author, and I must do 130 reviews a year. And wow. Nothing like this has crossed my path. And so you talk about in the book, offer and offense. I really love that, because you put in terms for me, an offense, which is something that you have a connection to. The offer is, what do I have to be able to give? And you tied it beautifully together, that it's when you discover there's that personally relevant, deep moment when you discover what your offer is. And so I was thinking, like, okay, that's good, but how do I take everything I've done in my life and my own past experiences, which started as a bit of a train wreck in my early years, but how do I take all that? And then I got to page 35 to 51, and it blew me away. So what Emily's done, everybody, in this book is put a mini workbook in terms of how you can actually go through a series of exercises, questions. And I'm just going to illustrate this visually for everybody, and then I'll give it to you to talk about. You've got 4 circles. Everybody, I want you to visualize and even draw this, if you're safe, on a piece of paper. In one circle is the word resources. Another one is capabilities. Another one is uniqueness. Another one is passions. Now, Emily makes you go through all these questions and fill in what those are. And then there's this intersection in the middle of all the 4 circles, which is the word offer. That's the magic spot. Now, I'm going to promise you, I'm going to make a commitment to you as my mentor, that I'm going to complete that in the next 30 days and share it back with you, because it's going to break through something for me. But tell us just a little bit about that whole piece, anything you want, and then we'll move on to the next part of the story.
Oh, thanks for saying that, Tom. I love the phrase blueprint and workbook, because that's very much what it is. I think we can all read a lot of inspiring stories. We can all kind of feel motivated to do something, but then we don't always know what to do. And over the course of the last few years, as we've been talking about the spare room a little bit, I put the book project on the back burner because I was invited to do a TEDx talk. So I've had a lot of conversations, which was a real gift. And I think the timing worked out the way it did for a reason, because what I found is people will generally fall in one of 2 camps. One is, I know the thing that pisses me off. I know the thing that I want to go after, but I don't know how to get started. Or they say, generally, I have an idea of like what I offer, the things that I have, but I don't know where to direct that. And so it really came together very simply through conversations. There's an offer and there's an offense, and everybody has a unique one. But how do you get really specific? Because I have a deep belief that when you can be very tangible, articulate about something, then you can lean into it because you can ground yourself in it. To your point earlier, why were we able to bring Devon right into our home? Because we know that this is something that we are equipped to do. We know that this is something we don't like to walk by. And we also know that at the end of our lives, like the last chapter, I actually go bigger than social legacy and have you write your epitaph. What do you want to, and it's interesting that you even said that about the Canadian study when people were 90 years old and looking back on their life.
Yeah.
What do you want to be able to say on your deathbed? What do you want people to say about you after you're gone? I think these questions, putting the end in mind, are really important because they allow us to live with much more intention and look back without having regrets.
Yeah, I don't think that's brilliant. I'm just going to bring us back both on screen to a shared view here. I was cheating while you were talking off screen. There's the gravestone at the back of the last part of the book, and I looked at that and went, wow. And what's really cool, everybody, you have to get the book. I highly recommend you get it. You read it. You got to give it a review. That's how authors' work gets known. But on the left side of that diagram, you've got your offer. And then on the right side, what's written on the tombstone. It's just incredible. And I can tell you that with this book, many more people are going to die feeling more fulfilled because they'll have found that. I want to share with you something personal that in my life, my wife and I have been married 25 years. She's a career banker. I met her there. Spent a third of my career in finance, became a CEO at age 31. And then 10 years ago, decided to create my own business to teach what I learned. And the interesting thing is my daughter's 23 in university on the other side of the country, and I haven't seen her for 2 years because of COVID. So it's crazy. Mm-hmm. And my little dog passed away last year. My miniature Shih Tzu. She was the Emperor's lapdog. You're probably familiar with Shih Tzus. And she's my little pal. And so we're empty nesters now. And my wife's Italian and I'm South Asian from Fiji and my parents from India, born in England, come to Canada, kind of messed up like the United Nations. And I was talking about this the other day, what now? And I believe that a lot of people don't think about that, Emily, mm-hmm. that they put all their life into their children and their careers. Mm-hmm. But like they teach in the Bible, and I've learned through my faith, that every institution around us will crumble. Our spouses might pass away before us. Our children will move on. Our jobs will go away. There's no question. Your job changes. And then what's left? Well, some will say the relationship with Christ is really the ultimate, why we can be fulfilled. But what are you going to do with your life? And if you believe in your faith, what are you going to let God do in your life? And that's where this book really is special, everybody. So I'm going to jump into one other piece here and ask you to talk about it. That I love this, page 83 to 98. It's a title, I think, Reflection. And it says, put a name on your offense. And this was really interesting because I'm going to be vulnerable with you if you've read my book or not. Some of the offenses that I really are stuck in my soul. My father was a very bad alcoholic, and he hurt the family. I was sort of the black and blue kid and endured that until he left, had many affairs and things. I fell back in love with my dad just in 2018 when I reconnected after 10 years. Through my relationship with God, I forgave him. I didn't know about his childhood story of being abused the same way by his father. So he just parented me the way he knew. So that was one. And then, of course, there was the addiction side, which is alcoholism. There was the spousal abuse and child abuse in the home, which is another thread. The other thing is I really took a dislike to growing up as a man of color. I came into this world as a minority. Today, it's a beautiful United Nations. But climbing up in my career, I endured racial slurs and being picked on and bullied. As a kid, I didn't feel very good about myself. So these are some of the offenses that when I see them in the world, I really take note of. Mental health is the other one. So I want to give it back to you. Talk a little bit about that because this is a part that's going to help me break through. How do you put a name on your offense? How do you narrow it down to that one thing that becomes that driving legacy? I mean, you obviously did it.
Even writing this book has helped me do that. I need to refer to my own writing, I think. This is why I was trying to think through, back to your comment on the blueprint, how do I make this really actionable? How can I feel some level of confidence that by the time you finish that chapter, you will be able to articulate your own offense? Yeah. So I thought and looked at a number of different frameworks. I designed a number and then I kind of threw them out. I ended up with UN's 17 Sustainable Development Goals because that is probably the most comprehensive framework. And then because they are are so broad. I thought, how do I distill them so that they're tangible for each person? So I can read each one and say, oh yeah, that's horrible. Or, oh yeah, that is terrible, but it's not really calling to me in that way. So I spent quite a lot of time, and my poor family had to endure it every single meal. I was learning so much. I'm like, did you guys know that expert people don't have clean water? Did you know that this was a problem? And I learned so much, but I hope that by going through all of those exercises, like you said, it's a lot of pages. And thank God for Post Hill Publishing, who then checked all of my references to make sure that everything is in fact correct.
Yeah.
I hope that you can develop your own offense, because I had to write my own. And, I kind of had an idea of what it was, but when you articulate it,
yes,
it changes your intention moving forward. Because I had to think about it. And I ended up writing children and young people who are abused, neglected, vulnerable, or marginalized. And even that, I had to kind of think through, is it babies? Is it children, young people? In what state of affairs, in what country? And then I wrote around the world, and particularly in the communities where I live and work, because we don't have a huge impact, our family. We've had 16 kids. That's, some people touch millions with what they do.
Yeah.
We really feel like this is our calling, is like in our community where we live, there is always somebody who seems to need help. And what they need is what we have sitting here as a free resource. It's completely unused, our spare room, right? It's sitting there with like yoga mats and dusty books. So that became the way I articulated my offense. And I hope that people can go through these exercises and actually fill it all in, because then you will also be able to articulate yours.
Well, I think that's amazing. My mind went on a journey in a couple of places. So here I go again, and just going to riff on this. I've got the book here again. Everybody, going to hold it up to the camera. You can see it. And you can see a bunch of boxes there. That it's brilliant. I mean, when I came across this, I'd never seen anything like this. And I have to give you so much credit for the way you think. I wrote it down in my paper here, the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And I went, what is that? And then when I look at it, when I went through this quickly, there were 17 square boxes and each one has a category. And I went, wow. And then I got a little disappointed. I went, wait a minute. I'm all over the place. How can I get me into one of those categories? And the more and more I looked at it, and I told you my vulnerability up front for a reason, because I was getting to this, that, I did my TED Talk on helping lift the stigma of mental health. I do things on my show to bring people to tell their stories, to give others hope who come from marginalized backgrounds. I was homeless for a period of time as well, not on the street, but I had no home. So I have all these things, like I said to you, all these offenses. How do I narrow it down? What is that legacy? This is really cool. I haven't finished it yet, but I'm going to work on it. But I encourage everybody, when you get this book, that if you're stuck, and I know you are, because most of the people I coach don't know what that legacy, what that offer they have is, this will lead you to a place, everyone, that'll crystallize it. I guarantee you that. Or you got to get a hold of Emily, and she can tutor you through it. So well done. I love that a lot. The page 113, I wrote this down, Emily. Let me just look at my paper here. Quentin, he was a young Black boy. We don't like saying Black in Canada because we're all Canadians, but Negro Black. Moved 15 times before high school, enrolled in the Marines, met Faisal in Afghanistan. And I think something came of his life. He did something remarkable. Do you remember that? Or you obviously know the story. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, Quentin is a miracle. He grew up in one of the most dangerous cities in America, in Florida. He found dance, which in many ways was a savior to him, because it allowed him to travel. They had sort of deep side and shallow side, which were conflicting areas. Yeah. And you kind of didn't cross one to the other. You didn't live to tell about that. But because of dance, he was able to kind of travel in communities with a little bit more freedom. He found freedom in dance just personally. And then one day, I remember he said this to me. He said, my world was on fire. And I happened to see this Marine recruitment pop up. Didn't know what it was. He went in because he saw a water fountain and he was thirsty. He went in and they recruited him. And he's like, well, like I said, my world is on fire. This can't be worse. He signed up and he was on a plane 4 days later. Wow. Joined the Marines. And what's interesting is his life had been so challenging. He was like, the Marine boot camp was not that difficult. Like,
Yeah.
Say yes, sir, no, sir, keep things clean. Nobody's trying to kill me. And he actually worked in the military for many, many years. And he was in Afghanistan for 8 years at Camp Leatherneck. And again, there, he just saw they were on the front lines. He saw so much pent up aggression. He saw different factions, even within the military. And so he and a friend started building up these sort of dance throwdowns just to release energy, I think on Friday night.
Yeah.
And eventually he just started to see this guy Fazal, who was an Indian who hated Pakistanis.
Yeah.
One night he looked across the room. He even remembers which song was playing. And I think I put it in there. He said, I saw him dancing with a Pakistani. And he just realized that movement and dance can bridge cultural divides. They can help us communicate hurts that can't otherwise be verbally expressed. So after he left the military, he came back to the States and opened up a nonprofit called Movements for Movements. And his whole life mission now is to leverage dance and teach workshops that help people bridge unspoken divides.
That's amazing. Was he one of those in your spare room?
He was not. He was just, so my publisher had given me the advice, which I thought was really good. Your spare room stories are great, but they're kind of unusual. Can you expand, can you broaden the aperture? So you bring in people from different industries, different levels, and also from different places around the world. So they're more maybe broadly relevant or appealing.
Yeah, no, I think it was brilliant. And the reason why that story stuck out for me was I read that at the beginning, and everybody, I'm not going to give away the whole book, but you got to find these stories. They're amazing. When Faisal started talking in the story earlier, he said some really hard things about hating Pakistan. The things that he said, I can't even repeat.
I know.
They're just
it's hard to say.
They're just not, it's hard to say and hear. And to go and find his gift. And so in other words, when I read that story, it brought together that whole concept of your book, that these, the offenses that were deeply personal that he cared about. And then what was his offer? He discovered it through this experience in the Marines and whatever came out of that for him with his creativity. I think that's the part of this book that's brilliant, because we don't unlock that. And you said something earlier about your spare room and, you just have 16 store people or whatever. And I want to tell you this, and because I love you and your book and what you've done here, that for everybody that reads this book, you basically have multiplied your 16 years, your spare room, because people around the world who read this, you're creating people who will create legacies. They'll multiply what you've done, the 16 years. It'll be on steroids for the rest of your life. This is a legacy. But I always look at that when you become an author, you become an expert, an authority on something. But this book is more than just the 16 stories, I believe, because what it did for me was get me to look at how can I tighten up my offer. I was thinking those 16 children in your room, I'm pretty sure that some of them went out and did some things and changed the world with their offer. Maybe comment on that.
Yeah, that's true. And that is my hope. That made me really excited, because I do think we were in touch with quite a few of them, and they're all extraordinary. I mean, again, everyone is extraordinary. I really think that is true. The more you get to know somebody, when you get to know their heart, you're like, wow, you are an unbelievable person. And some of them sit quietly as unsung heroes in life, and their neighbors may not even know how awesome they are. Yeah. But that's some of these stories hopefully bring them to life. And other people are living out loud, and they're very public, and they're doing amazing things. Like Arianna Huffington, right? She left HuffPo and started Thrive because that's what she really cared about. And she has endorsed this book, and she recently just posted socially. And my friends are like, how did that happen? She is on a very...
Oh, I think we froze up there. I think we had a little... I got you frozen up on my screen here. Let's wait and see what happens with the connection.
Whether you're Arianna, people all have this huge opportunity to live a really meaningful social legacy.
Absolutely. And so we're getting close to the end of the conversation, and we could do this all day and maybe have you back again to talk about 2.0. The last couple points I wrote down here towards the end of the book was take the first step, your social legacy, and then the the unpaved road and living your legacy. So we're not going to get into that. I'm going to tease the audience. They have to get the book and read it because it finishes the journey. Going back to you, I wanted to ask you this because a lot of times looking at the gift I think you have about not being able to separate emotionally, meaning you go all in and you care. I think you have to have that kind of resilience. That's what I believe to do what you did. Secondly, about your leadership, I read some of the quotes on the back of the book about legacy, and leaders today, they want to have a legacy. They want to lead with authenticity. And some leaders think that creating a legacy has to be the legacy of your company. Like some companies that say they're going to invest in healthcare. It's not that. It's about your personal legacy. And that's really what I got out of your book here is you didn't do this for McCann Worldgroup. You did this for a bigger purpose. And by what I'm admired and inspired about is you're infusing. Oh, let me put it this way. What I've learned is this. I'm just telling you what I know from my own mistakes, that when a leader comes to work and they can be seen as real, meaning they can speak with their heart, they become relatable. They become authentic. When a leader can show vulnerability, which means they can tell stories or share something about something that's they're passionate about, that's maybe sometimes exposes them to their vulnerability, then people will follow them to the end of the earth. I think what you've done here by writing this book as a leader of McCann is you've exposed your world of vulnerability of what you do, and you found a way to bring it in through the work you do as a leader. I think it's just amazing. I'm so proud of you. Well, the last thing I want to ask you about was going back to your childhood. Would there have been a thread because you were a latchkey kid? And I wouldn't say you were neglected. I don't want to, run your parents under the bus because many parents work. But was there a thread of that maybe you just felt from your early years in your gut that you didn't want other children to be neglected, or you wanted other children to have somebody when they didn't have? Was there any connection to any of that?
Oh, absolutely. I think growing up, as a child of immigrants, there is a cultural lack of clarity. People are making jokes you don't understand because your parents don't speak the same language. People go to social events that you don't even understand, much less get invited to, because their parents are all friends and, your parents aren't part of that social group. Yeah. My dad used to mow the lawn with his shirt rolled up over his nipples. Like that's how Chinese men cool themselves off. Right. And our neighbors would just stare, and I was embarrassed at times, but then I also realized there's this sense of discomfort of not really fitting in, or of having, knowing you're outside the joke and you can't really understand what it is. You don't really know what to do. It's a deep awkwardness.
Yes.
So I think when I wrote the middle of my social legacy, I said it's kibun in our spare room. Kibun is what one of our spare room occupants taught me about. He's from South Korea, and it's a Korean phrase. And he says there's no good English translation, but it's the idea of comfort for the spirit. And I think I was often spiritually discomforted because I didn't understand. I didn't feel I fit in. I didn't feel anybody kind of like, just give me a hand and said, let me explain to you what's going on, or let me help you. Here, feel at home, feel a sense of belonging. Now we have DE&I that's a big topic of conversation, and we talk about how we can create a cultural sense of belonging for everybody at work and hopefully everybody at school. What a change in dialogue from when we were kids. So that's what I want. I want to create a sense of belonging, a comfort for the spirit at my home for whoever enters or whoever gets to stay in our spare room with us and share life, or at work. If you work in my workplace, I want you to feel comfort of the spirit. I want you to feel a sense of belonging equally. And I think that is what bridges work and home. And to your point, it's what helps us become more authentic leaders, because people know what they're signing up for. They may love McCann for what we offer as a company. I do. I hope they also even more personally love that they feel accepted, that they feel like this is a place they can call home and that we've got their back.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, thank you. So you just nailed it. I always through the show, I'm always looking for that last thread connected back to the early years, and it's a teaching moment on the show here. And I thank you for being open and vulnerable. I talk to a lot of people who come on my show, and the ones who cover up their vulnerability, I just won't release the shows. And a lot of times I have people say, you know what, my parents were good people. I don't want to talk down about them. And that's not what we're talking about. We love our parents. My parents came into my life knowing what they knew, who they were. There's belief systems, as you said, in different cultures and different countries we grow up. And sometimes they have flaws or they have things they do in raising us. That's no fault of their own, but it makes us misunderstood. And I read that one story about the Korean person in your book where it really characterizes what Korean children endure, about failure and about, embarrassing the parents and all. And I have to tell you this, that my first marriage was to a Chinese woman. And I say that for a reason, because when I was 21, I married her. We were married 7 years, and I learned all about the culture, and she learned all about my culture. And one of the things I learned, because she had two sisters, having dinners every week at the house, was about the beliefs of her traditional mainland China parents, and listening to her two sisters and how they talked and the pressures they were under because of the culture, and they couldn't fail, and they couldn't do this, and they had to live up to these expectations. And their parents loved them. I'm very sure of that for the most part. But when you have all your friends around you and you leave the house and you go to school and you go out into the business community, you run into that feeling of, wait a minute, this isn't like it out here in the real world. Yeah. And that's where I came from as a kid, because the rules in my house, the cultural part that came with my parents, it certainly wasn't like that. And so thank you for teaching us and for what you do. It's just amazing. As we wrap up here, I'm going to honor you with some leadership words. I write these down unscripted on my paper, as you see me turning my head here as you're talking. And so the first one is risk taker. You are a risk taker. Number 2 is compassion. It just comes out of you. I feel it. Number 3 is hope for what you've done and what you'll continue to do. You give children and people in the world hope. Authentic. Man, we should bottle this interview and just put it out there for leaders to watch. And you are a beautiful offering. I'm telling you that from me to you. That's what I'm going to remember you as. You're a beautiful offering to the world. And so I'm going to surprise you. You probably know from listening to some of the other episodes that we are inducting you into the Quiet Warrior Tribe. And so you're getting an award. And if you see behind me on the screen, if I go this way, there's a picture there. You're going to receive the challenge coin. Now, these were created in World War I. They were carried by soldiers in their pockets to commit to each other some type of purpose or community. Today, all over the world, they're used for community. I had this one designed and handcrafted and painted in the US, and it comes in a cherry box. And by receiving it, then you commit to continuing your incredible work with purpose around the world to make an impact on others' lives. Right now, we have these coins carried by maybe 150 people out of 8 billion on the planet in 12 countries. And it's really special for me to honor you with this one. So welcome to the tribe.
Thank you so much, Tom. That's incredibly touching. I have goosebumps and I appreciate it so much.
All right. And I have one other surprise for you. I'll talk more about this offline, but I'll tease you that we have just launched a global platform called the QW Literary Award. And that award is being built to rival the Nobel Prize. And I know it's a big, hairy, audacious goal, but this will be a top 100 book list that we will have the world through my platform look at to find books of people who have used their some part of their story to do something purposeful in the world. It's all about it's all about the author having character. And I could talk to you for an hour about that, but character to me is very special. And leaders, I believe, will be rated more on character than their skills. And I think you have character because of what you've done and what you did this book. So I'll be sending you out a package and inviting you to apply for that competition. And we will be selecting 4 books a year only and be doing some press and things with that. And I'm going to personally recommend that your book go into that. So more on that soon.
I'm honored. Honestly, thank you so much.
All right. Well, listen, we're going to wrap up and give you the last word, but let's do something fun. You hold up a book while I do together in stereo. You turn it around so they see the back cover, and I got the front. All right, there it is, everybody. We're talking about The Spare Room by Emily here. And this book was released early April. You want to get it and give it a high rating, write a review, post it so her legacy expands quickly. Emily, tell us where people can get a hold of you and your work in this book, anything you want to share.
Of course, you can find me on my website. It's social-legacy.com. I'm on LinkedIn, and you can follow socials at The Spare Room Book.
All right. Simple, easy. I like that. So everybody find this story when it comes out on my YouTube channel as a YouTube premiere. Find it on your favorite podcast. We'll be releasing it. Give it a high rating and honor this story of Emily so that we can get her work known around the world. Emily, thank you from the bottom of my heart and my listeners for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Tom. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. All right, everybody, live with that passion and purpose as you see Emily does, and live the life that you deserve and desire. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Quiet Warrior Show. Create is a motive-based leadership development firm. www.kreat.ca